Welcome to Wildly Capable with Kate, a podcast made for those looking to unleash their wildest capabilities. I'm your host, Kate DeRocher, a dating, relationship, and self-worth coach on a mission to help people build better relationships, starting with the one they have with themselves. In each episode, we'll dig deep, turn inwards, and embark on a transformative journey. Together, we'll break free from unhealthy patterns, rip through self-limiting beliefs, heal past wounds, and build unwavering self-worth, all to create healthier relationships as a result. Get ready to explore the wild, untapped potential within you. Are you ready to see just how wildly capable you are? Subscribe now and join us on this empowering adventure. Remember, your wildest capabilities await. Hi guys, welcome back to Wildly Capable with Kate. I so hope you all enjoyed the first kind of intro episode. It was really special to me to be able to share a little bit more about myself and the why behind what I do. I hope some of you resonated with the experiences I've had and things I shared. And thank you again for tuning in. It means the world. Today, I want to dive right into a topic that I think is starting to be more commonly talked about, but that is still wildly misunderstood. And that is the idea of trauma bonds. More often than not, someone hears the term trauma bond and they immediately picture two people bonding, growing closer, thanks to a terrible experience that they both lived through together. Car crashes, deaths of loved ones, public shootings, what have you. While people absolutely do bond through shared experiences of trauma, that is not what a trauma bond is when referred to in psychology today. So in this episode, let's set the record straight on what a trauma bond actually is, how a trauma bond is formed, who's susceptible to falling into trauma bonds, and how to break free from them. I'll also tell you about my own difficult, life-draining experiences with trauma bonds. I'm telling you all of this because I believe it's really important for people to be aware of what trauma bonds are, especially for people who are in the dating world and looking for a healthy match. Knowing that trauma bonds can happen, and I'm going to get into what that even is, I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about here in a second, can help spare you from ending up in a toxic situation. So let's dive in. What is a trauma bond? Trauma bonding is an unhealthy emotional attachment to someone who causes you physical, emotional, and/or sexual harm. A trauma bond is where one party in a relationship, the abuser, I'm not going to shy away from using that word, I'm going to call it what it is, keeps the other party, the victim, stuck in their grasps due to a cycle of extreme affection and then periods of abuse or mistreatment immediately following that affection. Those constant highs and lows cause the person to become hooked on the abuser. The abuser fluctuates rapidly between showering the other person with tons of love, affection, admiration, kind words, gifts, and quality time, to suddenly being withdrawn, absent, neglecting, mean, critical, and oftentimes even behaving more seriously and becoming very abusive. They cycle between these ups and downs over and over, and as a result, the other person quite literally becomes addicted to them and the relationship. The victim becomes dependent on the other person. They become almost obsessive. The relationship is all they think about. It's all they put their energy towards. It completely drains their vitality. It becomes a really serious, really unhealthy situation, and it becomes that pretty quickly. And you may be thinking, okay, why doesn't that person just leave? If they're experiencing mistreatment and constantly on this confusing roller coaster, why don't they just dump the other person? Why don't they get out of the relationship? Let me explain. You see, when someone is receiving huge hits of dopamine during the times that the person is treating them super well, during the times of high affection, loving, gifts, all the things, followed immediately by huge hits of cortisol, the stress hormone, during the times the person is treating them terribly when the affection goes away, the victim's brain forms an actual chemical dependency, a chemical addiction to the situation, to the person. This addiction is very similar to what you'd see in someone struggling with drug or alcohol abuse. There's true science behind this, you guys. You've likely heard of Stockholm Syndrome before, right? Well, that is, in very simple terms, just an extreme, extreme form of trauma bonding. I worked with clients who find themselves in trauma bonds, and even though they know the situation is damaging and they know they're being treated poorly, it takes them time to be able to fully break free, to get out of the situation, to leave the relationship. It's more common than we realize, likely because it's something that isn't often talked about in the world of dating, which is exactly why we're talking about it. I personally have experienced trauma bonds, honestly, in a few of my relationships. My first serious relationship back in high school became a type of trauma bond where I was highly attached to my unhealthy boyfriend. It took me 5 years to finally end the relationship and move on with my life. 5 years. Another experience was later in my 20s when I started seeing a guy who at first made me feel so confident, safe, secure, but within just a couple months span, flipped a switch on me in a way I'd never seen before, becoming extremely psychologically and emotionally abusive. He'd reel me in and keep me hooked just long enough and well enough that when he started his cycle of mistreatment, ignoring me for days, lying to me, gaslighting me into believing I was wrong when I'd catch him, calling me terrible names, that I struggled to leave. I struggled to leave for a couple reasons. One, the switch was so unexpected that I didn't even have time to process what was happening each time. And two, I was already chemically addicted to him and the situation. It took me another 6 months to finally fully wake up and walk away from that relationship. Not to mention, oftentimes, abusers like these know very much so just how to play the game. They know how to say just the right thing at just the right time in order to draw you back in. They're masters at this. And anyone can become susceptible to this type of manipulation into trauma bonding. With any type of toxic situation or relationship, or with any form of abuse, it's easy to point fingers at the victim, to judge them and question them for how they let things get so bad, how they allowed someone who treated them that way into their life in the first place, why they weren't strong enough to leave. But I'm telling you, the reality is that truly anyone can become a victim of this type of unhealthy person or attachment. However, there are some consistent themes that can often be seen in a person's life and background that may lead to them being more susceptible to trauma bonds and unhealthy relationships than other people. So I want to share what those commonalities are with you, not to make you feel bad or point fingers or cause you to feel shame if any of these resonate with you, but to help you become aware of the things in your own life that may need healing so you have a better shot at forming beautiful, healthy relationships, the relationships you've always deserved. So those things look like difficult upbringings where you either didn't have a parent or caregiver you could rely on, or had a caregiver who was present physically, but either was abusive or that just wasn't emotionally responsive and in tune with you as a child. If you've been abused in the past, whether in childhood or in later years, you often become vulnerable to abuse again. If you identify with having a disorganized attachment style, again, pointing back to your earliest childhood relationships and the patterns that formed as a result of them. And the last one is if you struggle with low self worth or have a lack of relationship skills, because that may lead to not being able to leave situations at the sign of the first red flag or mistreatment. Good news, though, is that every single thing I just listed can be healed. I'm living proof of that. And whether you've never experienced a trauma bond, are realizing you're in one right now as you're listening to this, or are healing from one that happened years ago, healing so fully that you don't allow a trauma bond to take shape ever again is possible. It's very, very possible. I have seen that healing happen in my own life. But it took me gaining the knowledge on what I was even experiencing and the awareness to see how my old wounds and patterns were keeping me stuck in these cycles to be able to then break free from them. If you're listening to this and thinking, this sounds really similar to what I'm going through, let me help you better know what a trauma bond looks like. The signs of a trauma bond that you'll see within the relationship itself can be things like the relationship moving at a really quick pace, often one that you have little control in and aren't even comfortable with. The relationship becoming isolating. You're with that person more than you're with anybody else all of a sudden. The person showering you with kindness in their words and actions one day, but the next speaking cruelly or doing hurtful things to you and switching back to being their old amazing selves shortly after that again. There's an instant, almost intoxicating chemistry and connection between you two. The connection becomes quickly and highly physical and sexual. The relationship feels addicting, all consuming. It's all you can focus on. And then symptoms you'll see within yourself can be things like staying in an on and off again situation, even though you don't like it and feel unhealthy in it or have tried to leave, doubting your own reality, your thoughts, feelings, the things you've caught them doing, so on, to the point where you feel like you're in a daze and you're completely confused on what's true and what's not. Defending your partner's behavior, always forgiving them, giving them the benefit of the doubt, and even hiding it from others. Believing you can help your partner heal whatever it is that's causing them to treat you so poorly, refusing to give up on them, not speaking up on the way your partner is hurting you in order to avoid even more conflict. There is so much more to be said about trauma bonds. We could honestly talk for hours about attachment styles and how they play a role or the science behind them. You name it. This stuff is really in depth. But I hope this episode at least gives you an inside look at the psychological theory and term, enough to help you identify when you may be at risk of falling into a trauma bond, or to help you get out of one and heal from any current bonds to this extreme. If you're in this situation or have been in one before, know that I see you and I understand you. Please know that you are not alone and that healing is always available. If you enjoy this episode and if you learned something, please let me know. Hearing your feedback is so appreciated and valued, especially as I start out on this podcasting journey. And if you feel someone you love and care about could benefit from the things talked about in this episode, please share it with them. It would mean so much to me. And to learn more about how my dating, relationship, and self-worth coaching options work, DM me the word capable at Coach Kate DeRocher and we'll chat next steps. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you here next time on Wildly Capable with Kate.